Hi, I'm Allison Fleck with Bloom Culture Flowers. Today we're going to talk about a bridal bouquet and the construction and technique and how to put that all together. So to start off, I typically start all bouquets with greenery. In the processing video, I told you not to strip down the greenery, just to go ahead and give it a chop or a snip at the bottom of the stem. But before you start your bouquets, that's when I pick a few pieces of greenery out, and you're going to want to strip down the stems. Now these little guys that you are taking off to strip down the stems, keep these. I always have a small vase next to me for instances just like this, because I keep everything. Like, you can use these later on for bud vases or for boutonnieres, so keep everything. So continue to strip down your greenery. Like I said in the prep video, I have a couple of varieties of eucalyptus. So we'll strip down some of those stems, and I'll pull a few stems out of here and we'll strip down these. Okay, so now that that is done, we will start constructing our bouquet. So this is a hand-tied or handheld construction. And like I said before, I typically start with greenery. I like to start with longer pieces of greenery and start with making an X. And then I start layering in some other pieces of greenery too. Just kind of keep that X shape going. It doesn't have to be in the exact same plane. So this one's kind of draping to the front a little bit, and that's okay. So I typically start with greenery and start with an X, and it doesn't have to be a ton of greenery, depending on the style of bouquet that you want, or if you want a lot of greenery in your bouquet. This is where you, as a DIYer, have a choice. So if that is you, you can add in a little bit more greenery here. Again, you know, just adding to your X and layering it on there. So we'll start here. We'll start with the X shape that I've made with both varieties of greenery. And I typically start with spray roses. You can really start anywhere, but I just like that they have a nice pretty cluster. For me, it helps picking out, like, this is another prime example. This is another bunch on steroids, I guess. This bloom, or this stem of spray roses, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blooms on it. So we definitely won't be using all of these. So I would take the lower blooms off and put them in my vase next to me, and I would save those for boutonnieres and corsages. So I just strip this down, again saving all of those extra blooms, and really kind of pay attention to the way that the flowers are facing. You know, if you want them to face a certain way, make sure that they're naturally facing that way. So I weave them into the X. Again, another tip too is you don't have to have everything so close to your fingers. You grasp the stem a little bit longer, and so that way it'll give you more room and more volume to add some other flowers. So there are some spray roses. Again, I'll take another stem. This one's a little bit smaller and a little bit more manageable. And you know, again, on the X shape, you can add in the front of the X and you can add it behind the X. I wouldn't do just one side. If you do in front and behind in the X, then that's going to help you create more depth and more layers. So I'm going to place these beautiful blooms right there. Next, I like to go onto stalk. It's got a really long stem and a long reach. And again, I'm just going to add that in the X. I like to snap off the greenery here. You don't have to if you're wanting a little bit more of the organic or boho greenery feel. You can add that in, but again, working within the front and the back of the X. And you can angle it a little bit more so it's not right on top of your other blooms. You can balance it underneath and tuck these in a little bit more. So I've got a little bit of the stalk in there. All right, and I'm gonna move on to adding some of our bigger blooms. These Quicksand roses have had the night to hydrate and to open up. This is a great example of the guard petals that I was talking about on the exterior of this. Some of them have a really great color to them, and some of them just look a little chewy. So I like to pop those off as I'm working. Here is, again, working in the X, but you can just, you know, anchor it a little bit more into the arrangement. When you start pulling your stems out, you give room to add more depth into it. So I like to layer the flowers in. Okay, I'm just going to continue with that X shape, continuing to layer my roses in. I tend to go for a variety and scale of the roses. You don't want to use all the same size, but you know, sometimes you only have one variety like we do here. And within that bunch, there'll be some larger pieces and some smaller pieces. So that's where I like to play around a little bit with that scale. All right, so the bouquet is starting to take a little bit more shape to it. Again, there's going to be holes, and we're going to be layering and adding in more pieces as we go. If at any point you feel like you want to add in some more greenery, by all means, go for it. I think that at this point you can kind of see it to start taking shape and think there might be some really pretty options for greenery right here. Sometimes I tend to design in a mirror so that way I can see the front of the bouquet, and you can push and pull the roses and flowers as you see fit. But again, the X shape is going to be really, really easy and really great to start with. I like to layer in a little bit more of these pieces. Ooh, this one's really, really pretty. It's got a really nice grouping and it falls really lovely. Sometimes you got to navigate through. Oh, it's really pretty. Sometimes you need to pull out some other roses and tuck some other places back in. That'd be really pretty right there. Layering in a few more of the stalk to just fill in some space. I think that would be really pretty right there. Once you've reached this point in the arrangement, you'll start to notice that you have a definite front and a definite back. That is okay. A lot of times with beginners and just trying to make it easier, you know, you can arrange for two sides. So once you've reached this point and you think, okay, well, my front is starting to take shape, it's looking really pretty, then you can start to fill in a few of the pieces on the back. A lot of the time, since the back of the bouquet isn't really photographed or isn't really seen, sometimes I just fill the back in with a little bit more greenery than with floral. Coming out. Sometimes I like to just take a step back, push and pull some of the roses here, make sure that they stand out because they are such a beautiful color. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's a little guy hiding down here. Six roses. And that's why, again, I give you a range. I typically do anywhere from, you know, depending on the size of the bouquet, I can do 6 to 8. Sometimes I do 8 to 10. That might feel like a lot, but for a larger bridal bouquet, it's appropriate and it works really well. See kind of a hole right here. And having all of your helpers and assistants on hand, they can tell you, you know, oh, there's a hole right there, you need to add some flowers in. So I think we've reached a good point with our spray roses, our roses, and our stock. This is only 3 items or 3 varieties of floral, and it's already starting to come together really, really beautifully. At this point, I like to layer in some of what I would say are a specialty flower or a little bit of a smaller bloom for the pops of the color here. So now that we have a really good foundation for our bridal bouquet, I start to lay in some smaller blooms like the Lisianthus that have a little bit more of the pop of color to them. At this point, the X shape is still there. You can see the crisscross in the stems, but at this point, I like to thread the colorful flowers or just even a different variety through. So you don't necessarily need to worry about the X shape. So, tucking that guy in right there. Also working with the bloom structures on these. They've got a really beautiful reach to them. So just tucking them in here and there. Okay, so while I am tucking in the Lisianthus, another tip is to just cut your stems down as you work with them. It's going to make it a little bit more manageable. They won't be poking you as you're trying to rotate and move the bouquet. So we've got 2 of our Lisianthus in there. I'm just going to give maybe 1 or 2 more of the really pinky ones just to give a pop of color. So I think that Lisianthus looks really beautiful in there, and I'm gonna move on to these eye candy of Ranunculus. I mean, holy mother, these are absolutely stunning. These guys look like they're on steroids. But again, looking at the front of the bouquet, it's really starting to come together. I don't know if I really love that this piece of greenery is right in the center. If you just kind of weave it down, you can really, it's as simple as that, just moving some greenery around. But let's layer in some of these really, oh God, beautiful and frilly Ranunculus. Sometimes they get intermingled with each other. Again, looking at it from the front, I think here's a couple of what I call holes, and you can just add in some of your flowers just to create a little bit more depth. That Ranunculus pop right there is just absolutely gorgeous. You can work within the different colors in the Ranunculus. Some of them are a little bit more muted. Some of them have a little bit more of a pop to them. But again, maybe weaving them through here and seeing where they can really stand out. This is a point too where I might take some of the smaller strains of Eucalyptus and just tuck it in, give a little bit more greenery. Again, it's totally up to you. That's the wonderful thing about DIY flowers. If you want more greenery, you can add in more greenery. If you want more floral, the floral recipe, again, it's really simple. These are, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We only have 5 varieties of flowers in here. So we try to keep it simple, but using the best quality blooms, and the seasonal blooms really help get you the most bang for your buck. So a lot of people think that flowers have to be really complicated, and they don't. They really don't. So just adding in and layering in some more of that greenery just to give a little bit of reach. I might put some in the front too. Okay, so we are at a point where I think everything is looking really beautiful. It's looking really good. There's lots of reach to it. There's lots of depth to it. And this is where I typically add in some specialty flowers like I just did with the Ranunculus, and then some filler flowers. So here we've got beautiful wax flower, and this just adds a great scale to the bouquet. This is also another item that before you start working on your bouquet, if you take it out and, like I taught you with the greenery, just to strip down some of the stems, it'll make the process of creating your bouquet a lot more seamless. Don't be afraid to weave in some of the wax flower even into the center of the bouquet, just giving it a little bit more depth and a little bit more texture. Again, pulling out some of the roses that might have gotten a little packed in there at some point. Always keep your hand a little loose so that everything has a little bit of room to, to breathe and to grow. You don't want to have such a white knuckle grip that you're crushing stems on it. All right, this is starting to look really, really beautiful. I'm going to add in just a few more sprigs of this beautiful wax flower. All right, well, I'm really happy with how that looks. A really beautiful bouquet, has minimal varieties of flowers in it, not overcomplicated. Like I said, the back looks a little open, and so this is where I'll take some of that greenery and just fill it in a little bit. I'll fill that in right there, and then if you have any more flowers in your budget range, I usually just take a big flower and just anchor it back there to make it feel complete and a little bit more finished. But this will be our completed bridal bouquet. I will make sure to put the exact amount of flowers that I have used in the species, or pardon me, the varieties for those. Again, trim your stems a little bit will help you manage everything better. So taping the bouquet, you want to place the tape under your thumb and give yourself a little bit of length on that, and then stretch the tape. And I like to just wrap it really quickly. Sometimes it'll break on you, that's okay. Just put it back under your thumb and wrap it pretty quickly. And once you feel like it's a little bit more sturdy, then you can start to rotate it. And remember to pull and then wrap it around the bouquet. Pull and then wrap it, and pull and wrap it. And I would say a good 5 or 6 times. Again, the tape does not have to look pretty. You're going to cover it up with your pretty ribbon anyway. All right, then rip it off. And if you do see some spots that you want to add some floral in, now's a great time to do it. Just because you've taped it and got it to this point doesn't mean that you can't add a few blooms in here. I see a spot on the bottom that I think will look really, really pretty with a rose just right there to help complete it. So if you go ahead and you add that in, trim it down, and then do what I said again with your tape, is you'll just tape it in. All right, once we've gotten to this point, we are good to go. So find a clean vase with some fresh water in it, and go ahead and put your stems in the water. Make sure that all your stems are in the water so that they can be drinking and hydrating. So this is what our final bridal bouquet would look like. But again, if you want to add more greenery to it, if you're within your flower range and you still want to add more flowers and you haven't topped out on that, go for it. It's really a flexible recipe and helps you create such a beautiful arrangement and bridal bouquet. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that you learned a few tips and tricks on how to arrange your bridal bouquet. Like I said earlier, all of the flower varieties and the quantities will be in the comments below. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask or shoot us an email.